Tree Talking Time is brought to you by Conkeys Outdoors. Get all your hound hunting needs at conkeys.com. Welcome to Tree Talking Time, where we talk all things tree dogs, from the smallest feists to the largest hounds, treating squirrels to bears and everything in between. And from time to time, we might even run a little fast game. Welcome back to another episode of Tree Talking Time. I don't even know where to begin, but this is episode 100, and I'm just blown away at all the listeners and all the support I've had, all the sponsors. I don't know where this would be without all of you guys. I really appreciate all the support. I just got a message the other day from somebody saying they really enjoyed the podcast and to keep it up, and those kinds of messages really, really do help, because sometimes you just don't know, what kind of impact these are doing, and if it's really worth it, especially with so many podcasts out there now. I sometimes wonder, but I appreciate everyone that's been along for this ride. Like I said, this is episode 100. We're coming up on 2 years pretty shortly, and I don't think when I started this, I really knew where it was going to go or what was going to happen, and I just really appreciate everyone. I really do have to say thank you to my sponsors, that have come alongside me, and that's been fairly recent, but it's helped a lot. Conkeys, Full Cry, and W have really helped me out to be able to do this. This takes a lot of time, and I do really appreciate all of their support. I hope you enjoy this episode with Mark Zepp. I got to meet Mark at Autumn Oaks this year and had a great time. Got to know each other a little better, and I really enjoyed it, and at that point, I asked him if he would be interested in doing a podcast, and he wasn't sure at that point, but luckily I was able to twist his arm to come on. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Mark. He's a very interesting guy, and has a really cool job, but has an even cooler story of how he's gotten to where he's at today. So hope you enjoy it.
How are you doing tonight, Ben?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, this is your 100th episode, huh?
Yes, it is.
That's great. Congratulations to you. I think that's, this is like everything else in life that's worth doing. It's a lot harder than it seems like it. Mm-hmm. It should be to the outsider. So that's a big deal. A lot of guys, no matter. I think back of my time when I started with John and Linda at Wick Outdoor Works back in the late 80s. You see a lot of people come and go. Mm-hmm. And then I've been one of the lucky ones and been really blessed that, as a kid, I loved the outdoors and hunting and trapping and fishing, and then got bit by the coon hunting bug in my freshman year of high school, and then have been able to make a living out of this great sport of ours.
Yeah.
All these years later, so you see a lot of folks come and go, mm-hmm. and but I've been truly blessed.
Yeah, not too many people can say they've made a living in the coon hunting world.
Yeah, there's very few. I've said this to Alan Gingrich and to Todd Elm over at UKC, but mm-hmm. I think it's when we look at rules and how to change rules or enforcement of rules, I've always felt like if it doesn't matter to us, then who's it going to matter to? I mean, we have been very fortunate. There's a handful or a couple handfuls of folks out there that have been able to make a living around this sport or related to this sport. So we want to, if at all possible, we want to try to leave it better than we found it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I had great years with John and Linda and Monica Wick and the gang at Wick Outdoor Works. Almost 10 years.
I was going to say, how many years was that?
Yeah, almost 10 years. So, and it was It was great. I mean, I look back really fondly on all those years. And, I was a single guy right out of college, and it was, I was just, going to work for John and being his right hand man. It would have been like, I tell people it was like if you were, playing guitar for Bon Jovi or Elvis or something, your
Yeah,
childhood hero you're going to work for.
exactly.
And to be able to do that, and it was a special time of life. I traveled, gosh, just so much then, and then in my early years at Tri-Tronics, where you'd be gone 150 nights, maybe sometimes more a year.
Oh yeah.
So it really wasn't really a life for, I didn't get married till I was in my 40s. It really wasn't. Um, you led kind of a gypsy type existence in
Oh
some
yeah.
ways, where you were gone, and so I've been blessed, but it's certainly lots of work.
Mm-hmm.
People. I'm always amazed at people who don't have jobs, and then there's plenty of jobs, there's plenty of work out there. But they say, yeah, I don't want to work weekends. I can't do. Heck, I didn't want to work weekends either, but I
You worked
mean,
every weekend.
I worked every single one of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I say I got lucky, but I moved from a great place. My dad had built an empire there in Warsaw, Ohio. We had 1,000-acre farm, and going to Missouri and working for John required me leaving that slice of heaven, and
Yeah.
so and so you leave special people and special places behind as you make a lot of these life decisions,
Yeah.
But I've been truly blessed. Lots of great folks,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm how things how things have worked out, just unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
So,
No, what you're saying about the traveling, you live a gypsy lifestyle. I mean, I've kind of got a little taste of that this year. I've been to a couple of major events, and I've had more people ask me, "Hey, are you going to this event or this event, or you should come over here and hunt with me?" Or, you know,
sure.
and it's like I have a normal full time job, a
Right.
wife, two kids. I've got hounds of my own. I can't just like
Right.
live on the road here.
Yeah, it's when I never really appreciated that, or whatever the right words are. When I was at Wick, I was a single guy and I just went. So beagle events, bird dog events, pointing dog events. And I think probably the biggest thing that did for me without even realizing it at the time was all the connections you make, all the
Oh
people that
yeah.
you meet through, the dog registries, the dog food companies. I mean, everything you just end up making a lot of friends and knowing a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and all these years later, it gives you a tremendous amount of credibility as you've been able to keep going in the industry and
Yeah.
working. So, and I'm older and fatter and slower now, but I love what I do, and plan on. Gosh, I just our son, my wife, and I, we've been married almost 20 years now, and we've got our son Wyatt that's 18, and his passion is basketball. So he's a senior in high school.
Which, for people that haven't met Wyatt, it's the perfect passion for him. He's a giant. I mean, so are you. So
Yeah, yeah, he's 6'7" or 6'8" and long and gangly and
yeah,
cute, and handle it. So we've done a lot of college visits and this fall and mostly Division III and some NAIA Division I schools, and we'll just see where all that ends up. But
nice.
right now, gosh, his season's a month away, and we're looking forward to it for sure.
Good.
But I see, some of the big changes. Gosh, as you look at these podcasts, and I remember as a kid that at my grandparents' place in Wellington, Ohio, they had a 40-acre farm there on Whitney Road, and my grandfather always got Outdoor Life magazines, and I saw a little advertisement for Full Cry magazine there as a kid, and so I subscribed to that. And obviously Cooner and Full Cry, the great Terry Walker, who did so much for our sport, just could no longer keep those magazines going. But Jason Doobie out there in Oregon has picked up for Full Cry, and
have you seen a copy of it?
And I have, and it looks good. And any of you folks that are out there that still want to get a magazine, why Jason and his wife and family, I know they would appreciate the support. Obviously, UKC makes a nice magazine with Coonhound Bloodlines, but the registry supports that. Why? Full Cry will be, it'll be an entity on its own. And I'm one of those old guys. I still like getting a magazine. It broke my heart to see Cooner not make it, but I think a debt of gratitude certainly for Terry Walker for all these years, all the things that Terry did for the sport, and through the publications, and through really good times, and then really lean and tough times the last few years. But with luck, give a little shout out. I remember getting those Full Cry magazines and seeing all those Cass Walker ads, and Fred Moran, the Red Bone Man, with old Gold and Hickory and all those stud dog ads, and Dorman Klaus, and I'm a Red Bone guy, and I always have been. And some folks, I was telling my wife had some company here last night, but when I started, like in high school, from 8th grade to 9th grade, they made you had a list of 150 books you had to read going in to your freshman year and of high school, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and all these books. I mean, I have these books. Oh my God! And there was a book in there where the red fern grows, and I thought, well, this will be a book about trees, and I like being outdoors, and certainly I'll enjoy reading about that. Of course, the rest is history.
So is that what kind of sparked your interest in coon hunting?
That's it. A fellow by the name of Jerry Brzee, there in Wellington, lived right down the road right around the corner from my grandparents, and he had red bones, and I went on my first coon hunt with him years and years ago, and Jerry's still around. He can't hunt anymore, but I've got his nylon 66 rifle that he gave me several years ago, and hunt with it about every night. And so yeah, those were, I've always been a red bone man from that. And I remember writing Curtis Alburn and Terry Hayes, letters when I was a kid, and then, getting to know those guys, and Moran and Lubert and Big Dennis Gummer, and all those guys that my buddy Harold Hoffmeister, and just on and on, Mike Eaglehoff, and just great people. A lifetime of memories, and folks that I got to know. And
do you remember your first coon hunt?
Oh, with Jerry, yes, and it was back in would that have been 77, 76, something like that. And hides. I mean, this would be like $200 raccoons now, and the whole world. It was the heyday of the fur era, and you think about when the magazines had 25, 30,000 people subscribing to them, and it was down to less than 3,000 when when they gave up on it. But you couldn't go out, you couldn't be outside at night and not hear dogs somewhere.
Oh,
dogs running over here, dogs running over there in the distance. I mean, it was just a big deal in trapping, and when it did get too cold, and the snow would fly, well, I took up predator calling and calling fox, and just think of all those things. But yeah, when I hunted with Jerry that night, I stayed at my grandparents'. We hunted till 3:00 in the morning, and never did get a coon treat on the outside. And I thought it was just the greatest. You think of the thousands of hunts that I've been on since then, and casts that I've helped judge and hunted all around the country, and people will come up to me and say, "Yeah, I hunted with you here and there," or whatever. I couldn't even remember that. Well, I remember that night, every turnout, everything about it, and how great it was. And shoot, we never even treated a coon, but I thought it was the greatest thing the greatest time of my life. It just totally changed my life.
Yep.
And I just was sick over it. I mean, it just dominated everything. The sport. There was just nothing like it to me, and it just took over my life. And as when I got into college, I was a biology major trying to get into vet school, but I just thought, every day I just hated school. I hated high school. I hated college. Every day was a fight to get through it, and I could remember just hardly waiting when I was in college, hardly waiting to get on summer break so that I could hunt and all summer long, and in the heat. Now, gosh, it gets hot, and I think, man, I'm not going out. But and I was young and tough and thinner. Well, shoot, I could hardly wait for it. It didn't matter. Didn't matter what.
So, how long did it take you to get your first hound after that first hunt?
I would say like 2 years later,
Okay.
it took me, because my parents, they weren't real keen on it, but
Gotcha.
they finally just gave up, and it's funny. I got that pup from Dorman Klaus, and, she was a coon dog at 10 months old. I tell everybody, I was my first one. I'm still looking for one just like just took her and didn't really know what I was doing, and squalled a coon down, and it came down the tree, and she fought it. And from that night on, she just went and treed raccoons everywhere.
Nice.
And so I guess just like they're supposed to, but certainly the dogs now start quicker, and there's a whole lot more to choose from. Probably in all the breeds, but especially in the red bones. Well, we got a lot of nice dogs now, whereas that wasn't the case in the past. So,
so how many dogs do you have now?
2.
Okay.
Yeah, I got one that's 3 and one that's 1, and wasn't going tonight because it was raining. I didn't go last night. It was raining. The sport has changed so much with all this thermal stuff, as far as finding raccoons or shooting them with thermal scopes. But all that stuff is so doggone much money and expensive. Even to an old fat guy, I hate taking it out in the rain. So, if it's a little rain, that's something. But when it's really raining hard and doing all those things, well, I think, man, that's my excuse anyway.
I understand.
But I have 2, and that's plenty. With my wife has some really serious health issues for a lot of the last 4 or 5 years, but she is in remission now, and I'm really doing great.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, you don't realize how that affects everything in your life, and it certainly, the last 3 years, why there's at one point I wondered, do I need to get rid of the dogs with her as she got worse and worse, but hung in there, and a lot of folks praying for her, and she's doing really well. Even went to Autumn Oaks this year, so and set
That's
up
great.
and sold some few coon squallers and boot jacks and those kind of things. So,
you had a nice booth.
Yeah.
Nice you had a nice location right there in the corner.
Yeah, she did great with it all, and really, we didn't know when all this started how much she would be able to do, if she'd be able to keep a job. Obviously, I had the coon squallers, and that turned into predator calling and coyote DVDs and predator calls, and which got picked up by places like Sportsman's Warehouse and Cabela's and Bass Pro, and so that business grew, and we've started making some jackets like the old Wick Briartown jacket, and making some chaps now, and just a few other things. And
for anyone listening there, Mark makes a great jacket.
And you can get them at markzepp.com. I'll shamelessly promote, but yeah, I mean, that's a little bit about my life, and I've been, as I said, super blessed. Guys like Steve Fielder, still, he's another kind of hero of mine that's still, after all the years in the industry, and he's retired and obviously worked for all the different town registries, and still going, and he's got his own, Gone to the Dogs podcast, and little first sent out to our buddy Bruce Conkey. Here it's the 26th of October of 2023 when we're doing this, but Bruce just got home today. He'd had triple bypass heart surgery, and he's home and doing great. Talked to him a little bit this afternoon, and for my real job, I work with monkeys and a lot of tremendous great other folks, and it's just not business. You really care about those folks. And I remember years ago when Bruce first got started, and now to see his son Bruce Wayne taking over the helm down there, and working with his grandson. And
I deal with Zach mostly, and Zach's been kind of keeping me up to date on Bruce, because they posted something, and I was like, "Is everything okay?" And he told me, and I was like, "Oh, geez, it's a little more than just a little procedure." And he goes,
"Oh yeah." And he's had some, like Kevin Rainwater down there at B&K. They've had some other health issues as well, and John Wick has not been well the last several years, and has got congestive heart failure. So people ask me about him always, and we love you, John, and just hoping the best for you always.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know. That's rambling. Me talking a lot about me, and
that's what this is about. It's about you.
Yeah.
So, well, for anybody that lives under a rock and doesn't know who Mark Zepp is and what you do, you know, why don't you tell us about your regular day job?
After I left Wicks, that was a big thing in my life, I had tried to buy in, and that just didn't work out. And I really did not know what to do with my life then. And I spent almost, the next 2 years living out of my van. I was really into coyote hunting. I still do a ton of predator calling. So, coon hunting and coyotes have been my life, really. And so I just I bought the van and the trailer that I traveled all the hunts with from John and Linda, and I just lived out of my van basically for a big part of the next 2 years, hunting coyotes out west. I always, dreamed about doing that,
Yeah.
and so the Dakotas and
That's a big thing now.
you know,
Hashtag van
it's
life. You could have been a YouTuber.
yeah, yeah. No, I made 4 DVDs. That are a couple hours each, and started the first one when I was living out of my van, and just special times, special memories. I've told folks over the years that when they're having problems with their marriage or having problems with their gals, I always say, what you need to do, I said, is you just need to rent a van for like a month. I said, before you do anything, and just go out west. And I said, get rid of your cell phone. If you need to call anybody, of course, there wasn't really cell phones then. They're
Yeah.
just in the, and when I'd call people, when I'd call friends or family, I'd do it from payphones, and there's probably folks that don't even know what payphones are out there, but, shoving quarters in the slots and calling. I said, I did that. I said, and there was times when I'd be out there in Colorado or Wyoming in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, I could die out here, and nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows my name. Nobody,
Exactly.
and I said, you have those times. You'll be glad when you get home that somebody cares about you even a little bit. Cause
Yep.
at that time, when I was doing that, it was some of the greatest days of my life. I tell folks, you're so free, but it was some of the loneliest days of my life as
Oh, I'm
well,
sure.
because it's different when you go hunting with a buddy or something, and you take trips with family members and that. You share those times with special people, and you become family or blood
Yeah.
brothers or great friends, whatever you want to call it. But when you're out there alone, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about other folks, but particularly, yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a great time that I treasure, and I could tell stories out there that would bore folks for days on end about different experiences. Of taking showers at YMCA's or gold gyms in town, and or driving out in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming or Montana, and it's just getting dark, and it's November and December, and there's a high school there, and just pulling in there, and you can hear the squeak of the gym shoes, a basketball practice, and just walking into high school, and I take showers in high school, and anybody looked at me odd, I'd just say, "Hey, how are you?" and just take a shower in that hot water and think, "My gosh, this is the greatest," and off I'd go. You just think of how the times have changed now. I
You'd get
mean, you could
arrested.
no more. Oh gosh, you could no more do that than, but just really quite something. It was. Anyway, from what you were asking about what I do now in my day job, so from Wick, I started filming and out of my van, and I ended up in Arizona. And when I was at Wicks, I had my parents had retired in Arizona, and I had gone down to Tucson, and I had met some of the folks there, and I knew Chad James, and I knew the Colonel Bob Peterson, who was my boss, such a great man. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go down there to Tucson and just like do a story for like Cooner or Bloodlines or one of the magazines. And I went in there, and I remember talking to Bob, and he talked to me for about 3 minutes. He said, "What are you doing with your life now, Mark?" I said, "Well, not really anything. Do you need a job?" I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. And he said, well, let's just do that. I'll hire you. I mean, it just happened like that.
Yeah. Well, like
You
you
know,
said,
and
the relationships from working for Wicks.
it just is, you know, it's amazing. And I spent 12 years there in Tucson, and I met my wife there. We had our son there. We started Zepp's Predator Calls and Coon Squallers, you know, from there, and just really great memories, great guys.
Conkeys Outdoors is proud to be a sponsor of Tree Talking Time. Family, hunting, tradition is the Conkeys motto. They understand the importance of passing down the tradition of hound hunting. They are a family-owned business that treats you like family. They also understand the importance of having the gear you need when you need it. Conkeys carries everything for your next hunt, and it ships to your door quick. They also offer great warranties on all tracking systems and financing options. Check them out at conkeys.com. You can also use the code TreeTalkingTime5 in all caps to save as well. Out of curiosity, like I never realized Tri-Tronics was based out of Arizona, just because that's not really I would say the capital,
Sure.
the center of the sporting dog
Yeah, well, you know,
world.
Dale Lee. Yeah, you know, Dale Lee was the guy that started making those things, a big lion hunter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then Jerry Gonda kind of bought the rights. There was 3 engineers, and he sort of bought those guys out as time went on. And
Okay.
And there's always more to those stories, but Jerry Gonda ended up with the rights to that, and you know, in 1968, and started Tri-Tronics, and you know, for 30 years they were by far the leader in the industry, and then other folks got into it, and by the time, you know, as the decades went by and Jerry got older, he had a place in Traverse City, Michigan, and a real nice place out there in Tucson. But you know, he was an absentee owner for the most part.
Okay.
And my boss, Bob Peterson, left, and then another wonderful man, Gary Williams, came in. And Gary had worked for Loophole for a lot of years, and he was my boss out there for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. And when we had Wyatt, obviously, you know, when you have children, your lives change. You don't know that until you have kids. And a lot of people have kids when they're in their 20s, and but I was in my 40s. and so, and pretty set in my ways. So it was it was a really different thing all of a sudden, where a different responsibility. But, you know, when people ask, I said, you know, it's the greatest thing ever. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it would have been if I was in my 20s, but by the time I got to my 40s, you know, I had coon hunted about everywhere I'd ever could imagine, and I'd hunted predators literally all over the world. And I thought, you know, I met a great gal, my wife Amber, and out there in Tucson, and yeah, I just knew. I mean, when I met her, I told my buddies, I said, I just met this girl. I said, I'm gonna marry her. They were like, what in the world are you talking about? I said, I'm just telling you.
Well, especially you were that old, and
yeah,
you've been single a majority of your adult life.
Yeah, I told somebody, she had company here last night, and they wanted to know how we met. And I said, well, you know, when I moved to Tucson and met my wife, I said I'd just come off of a couple of years living out of my van, and I said, you know, she was the first gal I met in a couple of years that had all of her teeth. And I said, man, I went for that right away, you know. So, but you know, we've had, like everybody else, our ups and downs. But I don't know what I'd do without her. And we our life right now, you know, is revolved around her health issues, and then Wyatt playing basketball. But she's doing great, and Wyatt's doing great, and I don't know, I've hunted probably 12 out of the last 15 nights, something like that. And I enjoy it. I tell people all the time that for me, it's, when I'm out there, maybe 10 minutes a night, 15 minutes a night, I'm just that, 13 or 14 or 15-year-old kid
Mm-hmm.
again out there. And I just feel like, excuse me, I just feel like, my God, this is the greatest thing in the world, you know?
Well, that's
But,
awesome. After all these years, you still feel like that.
just, and so, but anyway, I got away. So, our last few years that we were in Tucson, once we had Wyatt, the school system was terrible and the border was terrible. Of course, you hear about the border now
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, but it was terrible then, and because you have all these kids come across the border, there all these schools, so the No Child Left Behind and all those things that we've got all these kids who can't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
So the school system was obviously, terrible. And we just, by that time, we both had thought about, my wife and I both thought, we ought to move back to the Midwest. And I didn't want to raise, we did not want to raise our son out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wanted him to see beagles going and coonhounds and trapping muskrats and be around some of that.
Yeah.
Which he really likes and enjoys, but how coon hunting took over my life, basketball has taken over his. So he's really, he leaves here before 6:30 every morning and is shooting in the gym every day before school and working out after school and practicing. So,
Mm-hmm.
and so we moved back to Indiana. My wife's parents were from Goshen, Indiana, and she was raised in Minnesota, but spent her summers here in Indiana, and that's how we ended up coming back to this area.
Okay.
And it was shortly after that. Gosh, we hadn't been here 6 months, and Garmin bought Tri-Tronics. And gosh, at the time you're terrified. You don't know
Oh,
whether
yeah.
you don't know whether you're gonna make the team or not. But it's been a great thing for me and for our family, and great people, a great company. I'm just amazed every time I go out there. You just meet so many wonderful people and smart people, and of course, it's an engineering based company, and then
Yeah.
we have a great sales force. But I'm just, it does my heart good every time out there. You just see an unbelievable. You know that there's hope for humanity. There's so many good people,
Mm-hmm.
and that make wonderful products, and so that's it. That's kind of my life and how I started as a kid, and I always just I dreamed of being a famous coon hunter, and I don't know that I'm a famous coon hunter, but I'm probably well known in the sport of
Yeah.
coon hunting, and that's a wonderful thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
No,
That's
you're very well known in this industry, that in this coon hunting world. That's for sure.
and so. But anyway, that's a little about me, and I don't know. Maybe down the road we pick a few topics. I'll see you at Grand American or somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
we can do another one of these things. And
Well, before I let you off, I need at least a couple good hunting stories. You've got to hunt with some of the best dogs in their day. Some of the best dogs at that time frame. So I know you have some good stories. I mean,
I
I'm
think
sure.
one of them that always stands out to me was I used to help back when Jarvis Humphers was alive, and so this would have been, gosh, like in the early '90s. I want to say maybe the late '80s, but early '90s. And I would be a backup judge on cast just so I could see dogs go. And I remember I was on a cast with Dave Roberts and Piney Creek Booger back then, and it's a little unfair to dogs any time to judge them on one night in the woods because they can either look really good or they can look really bad or whatever the case is. But he put on a coon treeing exhibition that night where the other three dogs in the cast, they did not look like they belonged in the same stratosphere. And I remember going back to John at the hotel that night. I don't know how that dog ever lost the cast. I think he had like 700 points that night, which is an unbelievable amount in PKC. And if he'd have just called his dog, all the time, he got to have like 1,400. It was unbelievable how he dominated. That was probably, as far as on a cast, seeing unbelievable work. But just, hunting with John over the years with all those good dogs that he had.
Yeah.
And taking photos of a bunch of those dogs, and especially, I think one of the bigger shocks to me was when he bought the leopard dog that he had.
Yep.
And I came to take, when I was at Grand American, and on the way home from Grand American from Tri-Tronics, when I was working for Tri-Tronics, I flew into St. Louis and we hunted for a couple nights, and it was cold and snowy, and we took pictures of him. But I remember the first time that when he turned him loose, gosh, there was just, it was as still, you could hear a pin drop from half a mile, it was so still. And then, gosh, in a couple minutes, just a big old ball mouth hound opened out there several hundred yards away. And I said, somebody's popped in here with us. I said, is that him? He said, yeah, and you think of, at that time they were leopard curs, and you think of them as being just little chop mouth dogs and like little cur dogs I was around at the farm as a kid, where you just, they treat a bunch of coons, but you didn't really hear them that long. And man, that dog had a big old hound mouth on him and a great big tree dog. And of course he went on into the Leopard Hall of Fame and those things. But being a part of just making some of those things, and I'm having a brain freeze here on those dogs. But the dog he bought from Mac McAllister, and the Babe Stylish Banjo. And so when John bought him, the dog hadn't been hunted for, several years. And I remember we took him out and hunted him to get some pictures of him, get some photos of him. And we turned him loose. I mean, it was one of those nights, the breeze was out of the south, and we were several miles away from Interstate 70, but you could still hear it, way off in the distance, you could hear like trucks, and so we turned him loose. And I don't know, about 5 minutes went by, and both of us were just standing there. We didn't say a word. And, of course, this was before the days of Garmin, it was still just the beep. I said, do you reckon you ought to turn that ATS system on and see where he's at? And he said, why? I said, because if he's still going how he left out of here, he'll be crossing that interstate about right now. But he got treed in there and had a coon, and we went to him, and that was one of the first times. That was the first time he'd been hunted in years, and it was. It's fun. Even on my lifetime coon squaller, while I have 3 different dogs on those cards for the life, but the one with the walker dog is Babe Stylish Banjo, one of the photos that we took. And,
okay. That's awesome.
And one of the stud dog photos that John used for him, he's up on a great big tree and really pretty, and back then this was before digital cameras. So you're just shooting a lot.
Yeah.
You got everything in focus. You're not really even looking through the eyepiece then. You're just shooting and trying to see, is his tail right? Is his mouth open? And all these things that you shoot some photography, so all the things that can, so, and then you think you've got one, but then you don't know. So you're, trying to make sure the exposure's right and covering your hind end for all of those things. But people would always say to me, they said, hey, that was a perfect, awesome picture of that dog, but the only thing is he didn't have his eyes open. I said, well, you know why that is? And he would look at me. I said, because when John bought the dog, he had like a tumor behind his eye, and his eye was like half bulging out. So the first thing he had to do when he bought the dog was had his eye taken out, and so just. I said, so I know, but I said, how he treated that night from where we took the picture. I said, he never did open that eye.
Yeah. If he opened that eye, we'd have some problems.
Yeah. But anyway, there's a couple stories. But, it's funny, and John would have people come hunt with him and when he had Stylish Billy and Crowbar and, gosh, all those people who, just come to see those dogs going and the interesting you'd have and the people you'd meet from all of those things. And anyway, next time we talk, well, maybe I'll talk about some of those dogs and things.
Definitely.
But I appreciate you having me on.
I really appreciate you coming on.
Sharing a few stories about my life and talking about myself a little bit. And
you've had a pretty interesting life, and this covers just a brief little bit of it. Between what I've heard in other podcasts, when I got to talk to you at Automokes, like, you've had a freaking cool life. That's just
it has been wonderful. It has been my childhood dreams. I've been able to live them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we live in the greatest country in the world, and you can do that.
Yep.
You can do that here, and you can't do it a lot of places. And
exactly.
And but it takes a tremendous amount of hustle and grit and work, and just keep going. When you're, I grew up on that farm, and the hills were steep, and you couldn't pound posts on a lot of it. You couldn't auger posts on a lot of it. And I just had a spud bar and a fence post. And I go back there now, and I can still tell you like how hot it was. And I remember putting that post in, and I remember all the rocks that were in there, and it took me an hour to dig that hole, and all those things. And I've always said every job I had since then been really easy,
Yep.
But I love it here where I'm at in Indiana. The huge part of me will always be in the hills and hollers around Warsaw, Ohio. It's still people always say you can't go back, but when I get back there once a year or so, and it just always feel like I never left.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is awesome. So sometime along the way, I'll either get back there, I'll have my boy throw my ashes in the hills around there when I'm gone, and I'll get back there one way or the other. But hey, I really appreciate you having me on and the opportunity to talk to you. And I wish you I wish you great luck with your adventure in the podcast world, and encourage you to keep going. It's there's great days for it, and there's tough times ahead, and you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep going. And so I wish you the luck, and I look forward to when I see you on the road next time. Okay, Ben?
All righty. Thank you very much.
You bet.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Tree Talking Media. And until next time, keep them talking in the timber.